Doing 93. This time I'm with,
NC Lord from NC Productions.
and he's gonna basically tell you the rules and how to play. He took a game that was for PS2 back in the day, and he edited to the new format. So we're gonna do his version of Duels to the Rose. So I'm just gonna pass it over to him.
All right, thank you. Now, basically, you start out with each deck leader, as you might even see over there. I've just, for demonstration purposes, given an opponent's deck leader. You may move it horizontally, which means up, right, left, and down, once per turn. Now, when you move it, this is the area you can summon and set and deploy any cards. For example, I'll just show you my hand. Field spells, as you can imagine, looking at the board. Go ahead and show the board. There's a field spell zone and all that, which basically implies each player gets their own field spell. Now, for example, in this case, I could normal summon Beast King Barbaros because of its effect, right? I could then move it up. Now, because I control an Earth monster, I can also special summon this guy to the field. Now, just like in the current normal Yu-Gi-Oh!, I could go into an extra deck card. I could go into multiple things. I could go into Ibe the World Chalice. Not that this is out yet, but I have a copy of this.
It is out.
It is out.
Oh, okay, it is. Sorry, I don't keep up with this stuff. I could go into this, or I could go into an extra deck monster, but that would take up the extra deck limit. So, if I went into, say, Gimmick Puppet of Strings, right? Then I could move it up, rank up into another card, Pain Gainer, it's German, so in case you're wondering, and then move that up and go into 7 since because it was my first turn I wouldn't be able to attack. Or, here's where things get a little bit more interesting, I could say, forget the rank 8, let's go for a Link monster. Now here's where things get interesting. Links, by default, they get to expand your, monster limit for extra deck monsters. Now, say for example, I had these somehow return to my hand, right? And I was able to resummon them all over again and do that. Now, it doesn't matter where they are as long as the material's connected, just like I explained before. But if the material's connected, they would summon to one of these two areas. Now, say my opponent's deck leader was over here, he could use one of those limits because it's within range of his deck leader. But I can sort of use them remotely because I control the card, which is only fair. So if I ranked up into something, it would end up in one of these two spots. Now, unless the material gets artificially moved, meaning Senate Switch moves it, or it leaves the field or something, it would remain like this direction would be occupied. So if I later just moved it up, it would still be occupied. I couldn't use this one, but I could still use this one, and my opponent could still use this one, for example. Now, for the more violent part of the game, attacking. Now, say my opponent had this monster on his side of the field. I just summoned this here because I had them here, and I went into this. I would then have to enter my battle phase and attack. And damage calculation would be done like it normally would. It would go to the grave, as you would expect, etc. It's also worth mentioning that if monsters are summoned or set, them and spells and traps, which I believe I have an example of, can both be set in face down attack and defense position. So for example, I could set Beast King Barbaros in face down defense position, and the damage calculation would be as normal. Like if he attacked, the damage would be the same. Now, for simultaneous special summons, say I was able to Pendulum, let's pretend that the Pendulum summons have the maximum scale. This is an 11, and this 12, and this is a 1, which means I could summon anywhere from like 11 to level 2.
Actually, there's a 12 and 0 right now.
Okay, well, I'm just giving a ridiculous number for the sake of demonstration. All simultaneous special summons are 2 or more, default around deck leader. So these would anywhere around my deck leader, but I'm going to choose this because it's closest to my opponent, and that's where I want to get. The scales, in any rules that acknowledge the spell and trap limit and all the link-related rules, would count towards your spell and trap limit. which is 5. So if I use these two, I can only have 3 spell and traps on my field, excluding field spells, of course, at a time. Now the deck leader, which I'm sure you're all wondering about at this point, is basically equivalent to a direct attack. If monsters have direct attacks, if they share the same column, they can enter battle phase and remotely attack. Now otherwise, I'd have to be able to move on to them like I would a monster, and that would count as a direct attack, and the damage would be dealt accordingly. You could chain Battle Fader in that situation. You could do whatever you normally can when you receive battle damage, and that's applicable. Similarly to remote attacks, while we're on the subject, say my opponent had this monster here, and Barbos, for some ridiculous reason, was given an equip spell that lets him attack all monsters at a time, or attack multiple monsters, not just attack twice. Which attacking twice gives you additional movement during the battle phase. For example, with Blackluster Soldier. Attack, destroy a monster, then attack directly, you could do that. Depending on the lane. But being able to remotely attack, your monster must have not moved, remained still, entered battle phase, and then attacked remotely, and that would have done the damage calculation accordingly. Now, despite their being face down attack position, links cannot be flipped face down under any circumstances. They're basically equivalent to tokens in that regard. They don't have a face down. Now, assuming there's not much else I missed, I'm just going to cover how field spells work. Field spells that special summon, like Fusion Gate, they all default around deck leader, regardless of the material being taken from the field. And perhaps the more applicable thing about defaulting around deck leader that would really be interesting, there's a card in my deck that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's called Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. Now in this case, I'm just going to clear the board because for demonstration purposes. This would default around the deck leaders simultaneously. So,
and before you continue, I'm just going to say, if it's loud in this video, it's because we are at our locals. There's a tournament still finishing up, so just don't mind the noise. I will let you continue. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's fine. Because these two are being simultaneously summoned around the deck leaders, I get to choose where they end up around the deck leaders. I could put the Gamma Cell as far away here, but I put them here because, you know, why the hell not? And they're both being simultaneously special summoned, and I get to choose where. Then, of course, I'd have to attack as an Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. You know. And the damage calculation would happen accordingly. Also, there was something else I wanted to quickly address. Control change. Now, this is very important. Say I already have this activated, and I summon a Kaiju to his side of the field. Of course, the same rules would apply. But when control changes, the monster simply faces from one direction to another. It still occupies the same zone. And these zones, by the way, do not have anything to do with your limit. If I ground collapse 2 grid zones, they are just unusable, but they don't count towards your monster limit or spell and trap limit or any of that. They are just dead on arrival, that's all. And now, one other thing I'd like to cover is trap monsters. Trap monsters and Call the Haunted, they work very differently in this. Trap monsters, they summon on the zones they're activated on. They get an additional movement if you already move them as a trap, which to some extent can be exploited. Call the Haunted, or any similar card situation, cards that don't leave the field when summoned, would summon around the Call the Haunted. Like, we're going to ignore the fact that's a Kaiju. And as for cards that, like Lava Golem and the Kaijus themselves, they would summon where the monsters previously were. You don't need to worry about them being connected, unlike extra deck monsters, because they're a unique ability. When something leaves the field for the summon of one monster, that's where the monster will end up. Not counting stuff like Mystic Tomato or anything that resolves in grave. That's pretty much how it goes in a nutshell. Anyways, that is my in-depth explanation about Duels of the Roses. I think I've covered everything in this video.
Anything else you want to say?
Well, with Duels of the Roses style, I think it's a more intriguing and in-depth form of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a little tricky to make it all work with a modern format, But I've always enjoyed this, and I hope to entertain many people with this.
And you've been doing this for what now? A year or so?
Yeah, give or take. I've gone through many prototype designs. This is the main kind of design with the grid of the squares. I originally had ones that just looked like the back of the cards, and that was kind of crude, but I expanded upon since, and, you know, I was able to get higher quality. I haven't even done very many in-person videos in a long time. I would just use Tabletop Simulator for my videos, as you might notice on my channel if there's a link in the below.
What's your channel?
NC Productions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd get you to say it just in case someone wants to look you up.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to get you a link in that description. Thank you for the video, and if you guys have anything to say, leave it in the comments, and I'll make sure he gets back to you.